Welcome to another episode of the Product Coalition European Tour. I'm in the bonus city of Cardiff, where I'm running the Cardiff series. And today I'm very excited to be joined by James Harding from Dupal. Welcome, James.
Hi.
Great to have you here. If you're watching on YouTube, you'll see that we're in a bit of a strange location. We're actually in an old vault, which is a great recording location, and hopefully from a sound perspective also makes for great listening. Now, before we get started, I firstly want to give a big thanks to Dupal for the introductions to all the guests in Cardiff. Dupal is a global online survey provider that has recently switched to a pay-for-value model, meaning you can get started with their real-time, multilingual and embeddable surveys for free today. Just go to dupal.co. That's DOOPOLL.co. Now, this tour and every single podcast episode that I'm recording is dedicated to raising awareness and support for the bushfire-affected communities, wildlife and volunteer firefighters back in Australia. If you enjoy this episode, please show your support for these causes by heading over to bushfire.productcoalition.com. Now, I'm travelling across 5 cities to interview over 50 product leaders like James to gain insights, knowledge, experience to share with you, the Product Coalition global community. Now, if you've just discovered the Product Coalition, welcome. We are a global community of over 500,000 readers, 6,000 Slack members and thousands of podcast listeners. Now, before we get stuck in, I need to give a huge thanks to a couple of brands and people that have made significant donations to support the cause at bushfire.productcoalition.com. First up is UserPilot, which is a code-free user onboarding and adoption tool designed especially for product management teams. UserPilot helps to increase conversion, user retention rates and reduce churn by guiding new users to their first aha moment with interactive walkthroughs, contextual product tours and onboarding checklists. It allows product managers to build full, customizable, behavior-triggered in-app experiences with a simple visual editor. Go to userpilot.com to book your demo and get a free trial. Shobit Chug is the intentional product manager. Shobit's a Google product manager, and he helps product managers become product leaders. They can have careers that they're proud of. Head to intentionalproductmanager.com and sign up for Shobit's free class on the habits that turn product managers into exceptional product leaders and help them move through their careers fast. Product-led teams like Mixpanel and Flexport know that the best time to capture engagement is when a user is already inside the product. That's why they use Chameleon to drive feature adoption, build onboarding flows, and gather user feedback. You can give it a go at trychameleon.com/success. 2 individuals I'd like to thank for their donations is Rich Mironoff and Chris Miles. James, we can get stuck in.
Fantastic.
I'm looking forward to this session. We're going to be talking about learning from your mistakes.
Yeah, it's an important one.
I'm hoping you got a few to rattle off. I know I certainly have. So this is going to be good fun. Now, you would have seen in the Melbourne podcast, a bit of an icebreaker around a bit of a locals guide. And in the Sydney podcast, we had the pub quiz. So for the European tour, I've gone a bit different. And for Cardiff icebreaker, I've gone with, is it Welsh or not?
Okay.
All right. So first up, we've got a couple of products, and gonna get your read on whether you think they're Welsh or not. Okay.
All right, let's go.
All right. So first up is the radar.
I'd say that's Welsh.
How come?
Blind guess.
Blind guess. Well, you got a 50% chance and you've nailed it. So Swansea-born Edward Taffy Bowen was one of the pioneers in the discovery of the radar. He built the first radar transmitter in the 1930s, and this inspired him to build smaller transmitters which could be fitted into aeroplane cockpits. Without radar, the Second World War could have been a very different story. So next up is the MRI scanner.
I'd say not Welsh.
No?
Yeah.
Any reason?
No, again, I'm not sure, but I just don't feel like it's bigger than Wales. In the nicest way.
Where do you think then?
The US?
US, yeah, I can see why. But you'd be right, it's not Welsh.
Okay.
It's our friends a little bit further north in Scotland.
Oh, wow.
The breakthrough for the MRI scanner was made by a team working at the University of Aberdeen. In 1980, the team obtained the first clinically useful image of a patient's internal tissues. There we go. Right, next up, I've got some words, and either they're Welsh words or sayings, or I just made them up this morning. All right, how is your Welsh Welsh vocabulary?
I lived here for 5 years, so I know
Right.
a few little things.
Right,
but,
okay.
Yeah.
All right, it's going to be
We'll
good. I'm
see.
hoping you fully integrated yourself into Welsh society and language. Let's give it a go. All right, okay. First up, we've got Uncor Mooncor.
Sounds made up to me.
Uncor Mooncor. You know, like Uncor Mooncor. Over there. So it means him over there.
Oh, really?
For the Welsh people listening, I've probably got the accent completely wrong with a bit of Cockney
That's what
thrown
it
in.
was.
Yeah, so that's what's thrown you off, and it's the Cockney,
It's it,
Cockney
it's it.
Aussie twang that's thrown it out. All right, let's give the next one a go. Chuel I Gugan. You know, go get your Chuel I Gugan.
No, I think that one's made up as well.
It's Welsh.
Oh, man. I'm rubbish at this.
It's the Chuel I Gugan is a big round thing with horses on, otherwise known as the merry-go-round.
Oh, wow.
That's it. So you can slip that into conversation next time.
Next time
you're down the pub in Cardiff. All right, that's the icebreaker done. Well done. You got 1 out of 4.
Pretty poor there.
So I think you do have another 5 years in Wales. So cool. Well, let's get stuck into learning from our mistakes, James.
Sure.
Before we do, though, would you mind sharing for the audience a bit of your history, career background, and set some context for us?
Sure. So right now I'm the lead developer at Dupont. I didn't used to be in design and development, though. I originally did my master's in literature and then self-taught myself whilst I was sort of traveling around Asia, building websites on the side and doing a sort of freelance thing there. I joined Dupont around just over 2 years ago now and sort of hit the ground running. I had to learn a lot, but been loving it, really enjoying the product scene.
Awesome. Thank you so much. It's always interesting to hear people's start and where they are today and how that path's changed. Was there any connection at all to engineering from literature back in the literature days?
I think there's a lot of connection in terms of like the research you have to do and learning to be a researcher. That's
right.
Googling things and trying to find the answers to problems is a lot of what we do on a day-to-day basis. And writing good copy is also a really important part of framing your app and sort of helping your users understand what you're doing and what they need to do. So having a good command of language from that can really help.
Right.
Originally, I wanted to be a travel writer, which is why I built my own blog, and that's how I learned how to build things and build websites. So that's kind of really where it started. So it doesn't feel like a normal sort of transition, but there was a lot of sort of like goalposts on the way there.
I imagine your commenting in the code is beautiful.
I like to think so.
Well-formed verses.
Little sonnets.
Yeah, little sonnets in the code.
Yeah.
Just gives it a bit of spark for the engineers reading through. Fantastic. So today we're going to talk about learning from mistakes. Get us started. What mistakes have you been making and learnt from when it comes to product decisions so far?
One of the ones that sort of comes to the forefront of my mind is a recent feature that we've released, which is open text. So it's a new question type for us. And we've been holding off on building it for around 3 years now. We've had a lot of requests from our users. It's something they've really sort of pushed towards, and we've been a bit opinionated in holding off from. And the reason why we've now sort of changed our mind and realised that maybe it was a mistake to hold off. There's a sort of lot of things involved in that. And I think the main thing is the fact that we needed to understand the solution that we were trying to solve for our users. We've got 2 sets of people who use our platform. We've got the respondents and we've got the people who create the surveys.
Right.
And we felt that response rate was a really important part of what our users wanted from the platform. Getting more data is better. But sorry, I've completely lost my train of thought.
No worries, all good.
One of the things that we learn as time goes by is that a lot of what our users want is actually being able to dig deeper into their data rather than just having more of it.
Right, okay.
And so while we were protecting the platform, open text, I should say, has a lower response rate than all of the sort of question types where you would select from an option because there's more of a barrier in place.
So these are the the big input boxes
That's
in
right.
the forms, as opposed to choosing from radio buttons or
That's
checkboxes,
it, yeah,
etc.
yeah.
Right. Okay.
So by switching and adding the open text, we knew that response rates would drop down, which would be worse for our users because they'd get less data.
Right.
But after talking to our users a lot more and sort of learning from them over the last 3 years, we've really come to see that even though they might have less data, being able to understand one or two sort of really core comments from users can be really impactful for them.
Right.
They can show these around, whether it's for the marketing team, shown around board meetings, that sort of thing, and it can get a lot done. A lot of action can be made from them.
Right.
So that was a sort of mistake we made in understanding where the real core problem lied for them and what they needed. Response rates are still really important, but it's just not always the main thing.
So you've gone from being purely quantitative, data-driven to now mixing it up with a bit more qualitative insight along the way.
Absolutely.
And you're finding it's a worthy trade-off.
Yeah.
Is what I'm hearing.
Absolutely.
For a drop-off rate, but if you can get some quality around that, fantastic. And can you tell me on the same sort of line of thought, what else are you looking to do more of or less of?
So I think using metrics to really understand and make good product decisions is something that we want to do a lot more of. Very recently, it's only a small detail, but we've built charts that can be downloaded for the data that people have on the platform. And it was a great feature, really great adoption rate. But one of the things that we had a problem with is the labels on the charts.
Right.
Because users can have as long a label as they want, causes problems with design. So we made a decision to snip them off at a certain amount of characters. That was kind of an arbitrary figure of 22. And we've had a lot of requests for how can we make this better? This isn't good enough for us. Some of our users will have like a Welsh and an English translation side by side, and it cuts off one of the translations completely. So one of the things that I did this week was to really get to grips with how much the average character rate of our users are, and dig down to how we can build this to be the best for the most amount of them. So 85%. Right. So doing that data sort of analysis and pulling that insight, we've now made it 35 characters, right, which will account for almost all of the apart from the sort of like top end.
Yeah.
Using those sort of things will really help us, I think, going forward. And it's something that I haven't done as much of in the past when making those decisions because it just hasn't sort of come up.
Can I ask about, obviously you're in a lead engineering role there, and you're jumping into the data, but you've obviously got some product direction. So how does this relationship between the data digging and insights that you're finding that you've just talked about and product come together and working with the product team and UX, obviously, by the sounds of it as well?
Well, like we've got quite a small team, so a lot of those different roles are sort of done by me and sort of the three of us, really. Yep. So in terms of the relationship between them, I think it's just a case of trying to balance them, the different factors in there and getting the time to put the due diligence in to get that data and really sort of understand what it means.
What I like that you mentioned earlier was about the multilingual side of it as well. Could you tell us a little bit how that maybe affects the product design and particularly also from an engineering perspective? How do you handle that?
It's really hard because you don't want to over-engineer the platform and you don't want to give too many sort of options to the user. I mean, the hard thing about multilingual is trying to maintain a really good user experience. It's also got a lot more overhead on the development side of things, even from like doubling up on the translation strings. It's a lot of extra work to do and it can slow down release. We want to work in like a really lean sort of methodology, and when we're waiting, an extra week to get translations before we can get a feature out, it can hold us back. So it's been a challenge, I think, but it's also one of our strengths as a platform. So again, it's about that balancing. Like this is something that our users really need and want. We've got to be the ones to find a way to do it well for them, so that it maintains that simplicity and easy to use sort of features without putting the burden on the users. And the product, is it designed for being embedded in other sites? Yeah, so that's something we recently built. So it can be embedded into blogs, into different websites.
Right.
And one thing that we've had a lot of success with recently is into articles, sort of like online media.
Right.
The engagement with it has been really high. And one thing it's been really good at is getting emails.
Right, okay.
We feel like we found that by asking a few questions of people, again, not the open text, because this can sort of add a barrier there, but easy engagement questions, people feel like they've invested in something and more likely to sort of leave that email at the end.
Right, nice.
Which is something our users really appreciate.
Right, okay, okay. This is really, really good. And so working and designing the product for users that complete surveys versus customers that I suppose are paying you for the service, do you see different needs from both? Is there any conflicts there?
Absolutely. I think, for a respondent, it needs to be as simple as possible.
Right.
You don't want to put any sort of barrier in the way of them answering if you want to get that completion done and get the best answer for them. At the same time, if that data isn't valuable to the user that's collecting it, it hasn't got, it's not worth much for them. So really, there's a conflict there because we need to balance getting as much data as possible without getting sort of data that doesn't have much meaning to it.
And I know from my own experiences throughout my career of building any sort of survey or online form, having to keep myself in check of why am I asking this question? Like if I had 1,000 responses to this true or false answer, what would I do with that data? Do you find yourself having to educate your customers on those types of concepts? Right, okay.
I think it's really a real difficult thing to get proper actionable insights, as you said, and that's one of the sort of the missions that we want to do is help our users get those actionable insights. A lot of that's education. Right. So we've recently released our new blog, so we put a lot of work into getting that out there. Mark, our CEO, does a lot of work on that, and that's sort of educating our users on to why are they asking their surveys, what questions can they ask, and how will that affect their users. For instance, talking about the open text and how from the data we can see that it drops 10-15% of your users you might lose just from asking that question. Right. So do you want to ask it at that time? Do you want to start with it and trying to help them sort of construct a survey in the best way possible? Yeah,
I imagine for a lot of businesses they want a lot of deep data around people, and sure. I imagine there's quite a bit to think through with regards to the timing of when to ask some really personal questions and when not to. And I imagine you've also got regulatory overheads of what you can't ask people maybe.
I think, that's been something that's come up a couple of times recently, and it's an interesting one. There's a lot to think about when you're dealing with data, and making sure that's protected, and who can see that data from our side. We've had questions about like who can see things on the platform and whatnot. So it's something to think about.
Can I ask, what have you learned since entering into this role that you didn't know before that now you would give as tips or advice for anyone moving, particularly I suppose from an engineering practice that's also wearing a product hat like you are?
Absolutely. I definitely tend to over-engineer things. And one thing that's really helped me is asking why more. Right. Sort of almost annoyingly, 5 times, keep asking why, so you can really understand the problem that you're dealing with and the solution that you're trying to solve. And one thing that we had a couple of years ago was a lot of requests for grouping and categorizing polls that people had been answering. And it seems like a fairly simple, easy feature to build and something that'd be useful. But we dug into it more. We asked why many, many times, and found out that what the person was doing was just duplicating the same poll many, many times. And what they really wanted was to do the same poll many, many times. So that was what was filling up their account with all these extra things they needed to group and organize. So we eventually built a feature called recurring polls, which allows them to sort of see and track over time or across groups. It's been a really great feature and people really enjoy it. But if we'd have taken it at face value, we basically wouldn't have ended up with the right thing. And I think on top of that, you can get into the state where you'll build everything that comes, gets asked, and probably a few more, and you're kind of really missing what's being asked of you. And so that's something that I've really had to learn over time, because I get excited about new features and I just want to dive in and build them.
As we know, it's to build it, then you've got to support it, then you've got to manage it, then you've got to regression test it. And I love that. story to hear that you found a particular instance where you've prevented making the mistake as opposed to learning from the mistake. You've learned from those mistakes, and now you're on a preventative path of being able to prevent creating features that aren't loved. Can I ask, how do you work with your customers to get to answer those whys? Is that, do you survey your customers? Is it qualitative, more sort of face-to-face interviews?
Sure.
What's your approach
We
there?
do a number of things. One is to survey them when we've got the tools, so it's a useful way to do it. But a lot of our interaction, or a lot of my interaction, comes from support requests and then digging deeper into those. So I'll have a support request of, I can't do this, or how do I do this, or something. And when we dig in deeper, we use Intercom for this, we can get a lot of great insights from that. And our customers also really engaged, so we can organise little interviews and phone calls so I can really get a chance to chat with them and get feedback that way.
Right.
And that's been invaluable for us, those real conversations, because often, when you've got just data or just metrics, it doesn't always give you the complete picture. You've kind of got to have both.
Right. I can imagine strategically for the business, with the amount of data that you're collecting, the data science opportunity is going to be huge.
Yeah, it's something that we've looked into a lot, and there is so much opportunity there. We do some work with sentiment analysis at the moment, which is something that I really enjoy working with and trying to understand more. But some of the things we were talking about earlier with, constructing a good survey, this is something that really interests us from a data perspective. Can we sort of, from that data, start to understand what a good question looks like? Can we rate that as a user sort of building it and things? And I think that's what we would like to work towards a lot more in the future, sort of leveraging that.
Can I ask for the product managers listening, they're always surveying or running qualitative workshops, etc., and asking questions of users and other teams, etc. Working so close to the surveying, questioning space that you are on a day-to-day basis, what are some top tips for building a good survey that product managers should do that might be obvious but they still forget about it or ignore? What would you say?
I think you mentioned one good point earlier, which is really understanding what you want to ask. What are you trying to get from this? Right. Have a hypothesis that you're trying to test. I think that's a good place to start. I think on another level, keep it short. People don't want to be answering hundreds of questions. I've done some surveys in the past where, I've got 20 pages in and I'm just going to give up on it. This is an important thing. Again, try and make your data wherever can quantitative. It's easier to work with that data and draw insights from, and only dig down when it's really necessary.
Awesome. What product development approaches are you admiring? Who else in this space are you watching and
I mentioned that we used them earlier, and Intercom's a real great product development company that I love. They've just got a great mission, making the internet personal, and I think having a good mission to align behind is something that really creates good products. That's something that I think we're working more towards, a really a great alignment sort of phrase that can take you forward and help decide what features you build or don't. It should be something that will cut some things off and make sure that some things are included. And I think they've nailed that at Intercom, and that's why they've built such a great and useful product.
Yeah, they've certainly gone from strength to strength in that. I think it's probably about 4 or 5 years now following them. And again, doing a lot with obviously natural language processing and automation, etc. So they're definitely an exciting one to watch. Thanks so much
for
the chat, James. It's been great to talk through. Making mistakes is and owning up to mistakes and being able to reflect on mistakes, I think, is very important for anyone in any role, to be honest. But what I particularly tip my hat to is when people are willing to have a conversation about the mistakes and the reason for me why is they're putting themselves in a vulnerable space, and I always have a lot more respect for someone that's willing to put themselves in somewhere vulnerable and talk about mistakes and be able to reflect either at home with family or with a peer at work, or just generally with the industry as you're doing today.
Yeah.
So thank you very much. It's been great to talk through.
Yeah, it's been great. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. If you've enjoyed this episode or any of the episodes for the Product Coalition European Tour, please do remember I'm committing this time to meet with over 50 people to raise awareness and funds for the bushfire affected communities of Australia, as well as the wildlife and the volunteer firefighters. So please consider donating to those causes over at bushfire.productcoalition.com. Until the next episode from Cardiff, take care. Speak to you soon. Bye.